So my name is Penny Townsend, and I'm here today to talk to you about overcoming integrated payment challenges, connecting the cloud to installed software. And so it's really a talk about how you can, what methodology can you use in order to try and make these connections. And so just a teeny tiny little bit about me and the company I work for. I am a co-founder and the Chief Product Officer for Qualpay, and Qualpay is a cloud native technology. We built out a payments platform that we use both for acquiring and processing payments for our own portfolio, but we also use our technology to serve other financial institutions in the market that may want to also use some of the microservices like underwriting, risk management, processing, and you can also use our full stack as well. I forgot to use the word elegantly because I swear I must have put that in just to get that word in. So today I'm going to review a little bit about some of the universal challenges that we have found when we built out our native cloud platform and how when we were connecting into some of the verticals that we have moved into and some of the challenges that we've had. I'm going to talk a little bit about when you're trying to kind of work on integration, how you go ahead and begin. And the beginning is always have a vision. And I'm going to talk about how you start to build that and start looking at the problems within a particular segment that you're looking at. And then I'm going to introduce the idea of software gymnastics. Now, I have had probably, say, 3 different careers in my life. My first career was in teaching. I taught dance, ballet, modern tap, jazz, and gymnastics. And so I have a very big affinity to the concept of gymnastics. And I always throw around the term, like, we use software gymnastics in order to kind of figure out how we do the integration. So I'm going to kind of pull little tenets from that and talk about how we use it and infuse it within our company. And then to round out the thing that's disappearing off the side, I'm going to talk about how you can use some of these tenets I'm going to talk about to actually integrate at scale. So some of the universal truths are that when you start to look at some of the older verticals that are out there, and I'll give you an example of waste, pest, energy, they are using software that began around in the 1995 timeframe, and they paid a lot of money in order to have this software installed on premise. And then when it comes to payments, obviously it's changing nearly every day what can be done and how the consumer wants to pay. And one of the problems that we have is how do you bridge going from some of this older software to the more modern software that is out there. And for us, the challenge was how do you take cloud-based technology and then go ahead and actually have an interaction with the on-premise software. So some of the challenges that we have, the first one I just talked about a little bit, how do you take some of the new payment things that are out there, like Apple Pay, and have the consumer pay? The second thing is that a lot of this software was crafted prior to PCI, and does everybody in the room know what PCI is? Yeah. Okay, good. So I don't have to describe it, but it came in around the early, I think it was 2004, 2005. So this software predated it. And it's not that the software is not secure, because there's a difference between security and compliance, but the software is not compliant, right, to PCI. And part of the problem, because as an organization, Qualpay has to make sure that people are PCI compliant from our acquiring hat is part of what we need to do in terms of due diligence and maintaining, and then we report into the card brands about who is and who is not PCI compliant. Anybody using this older software, when we started to look at this particular market, could not get PCI compliant. And so the other acquirers in the industry basically said, blanket, don't worry about it, you never have to be compliant. And that is also a bit of a problem inherently in this industry. And we wanted to think about how could we get these merchants compliant, because they had a little anxiety around that. The third challenge is that not only did they have this one on-premise software installed, they were using many different other softwares in order to take payments. So customer portals, online customer portals came about, and they're like, oh, we'll use this technology over here to use that. And then in the field, somebody needs to take payment, there's another technology at play. And then when you start to then figure out how the payment flow is going to work and where the transaction is actually began, it becomes very complex and may have stepped through 3 or 4 different gateways in order to get where it needs to get to be approved. And the complexity that, I would say that Qualpay is focused on is how do you intelligently tell somebody about where the transaction happened to when they got the money in the bank account, because cash is king. People just want to know what happened to my money. And we wanted to solve this traceability problem that was kind of inherent in the vertical we were taking a look at. And of course, it's all about trying to connect what we had built in the cloud to all of these old, different, disparate systems. So the vision that we had was to take our cloud software and connect it into the on-premise software that was hidden very nicely behind a firewall. And we wanted to be able to remove the PCI complexity by collecting, storing, and processing the card data on our own servers, which meant that we could remove the software out of PCI compliance and let the merchant have a good chance of actually becoming compliant. And then also what we wanted to do was to reduce some of the complexity that was inherent with using all of the vendors that was sitting behind. And so we had a situation where the on-premise software is connected to somebody like an authorize.net or CyberSource. And then for their online business, it was going another direction, USA ePay, and then their in-field software was going a different direction too. And they were logging into, in that example, they would have been logging into at least 3 or 4 different portals in order to answer the question of where's my money for each of the ways that they were taking payments. And so we kind of wanted to solve that. And the way that we package up our product is that we enable them to get rid of a lot of the other vendors that are sitting behind the scenes. Wow. So sorry about it disappearing. This says creating the bridge with a cloud-based browser. So we wanted to take what we can do in the browser and then connect it into this on-premise server. So one of the first things, and I know I put it as a question mark, is VPN. Can you get there via VPN? And the answer is yes, you can. It's just not necessarily what was inherently what we were really good at doing. So we didn't have any VPNs connecting to anything at this point, except maybe as a backup to our behind-the-scenes payment processor. And we wanted to keep a short time implementation on what we were doing, which was nearly impossible when you throw in a VPN. And the fact that a lot of these customers didn't have in-house IT groups, so they were using a third party and they were trying to go ahead and get them to actually talk to us. We were very anxious about that. And then one of the other problems that we inherently had was getting from the browser to the in-premise software caused 2 problems. The first one was SSL. So when you go ahead and make the call from the software in the browser and it's trying to connect to the on-premise software, it's doing a return back from that server to say what's allowed. And we were trying to go from HTTPS to HTTP. And so that was like, we couldn't make the step because of it. And then the second problem was that it's coming from a different domain and they didn't have cores switched on in their software. So it didn't allow us to make that hop. So we failed like at 2 gates if we weren't going to use a VPN. So this is where I come to talking a little bit about gymnastics. And imagine the Olympics. Gymnastics, I don't know how many of you have watched gymnastics or, okay, awesome. That inherently it's a marquee sport. And one of the favorite ones that I like to watch is the floor routine. And the floor routine is on a 40 by 40 mat. And when they're doing their tumbles, they are going 56 feet when they do the diagonals. And it's very artistic, and it takes a lot of strength, flexibility, and power. And this is the way I think about when we are trying to do these integrations and build these bridges, that we have to come at it from not this rigidity standpoint, but from a very flexible standpoint. So throw out a little look of your thoughts about who you are and what you are, and start focusing a little bit on what's it going to take to make that bridge, but keeping in mind your core strengths. So the first thing you want to do after you have your vision, and I'm sure most of you in the room probably have had this situation where you've needed to create a bridge between what you have from the new to what's out there, because we're all in fintech, and that's actually what we're doing nearly every day, is figuring out how you bridge the old to the new. So the first thing, once you've got your vision, is that you start to do the choreography. So now, what does it look like? What does the design look like? What are the opportunities? So coming back to gymnastics is like, now you have the floor, you know what the judges want, you have the music, because it's all set to music. Now, what can I do in the framework of the 40 by 40 to make it be the best gymnastics floor scene that's ever been? Next up, you're going to practice. So you decided that you can do, 40 somersaults in a row, which is not very pragmatic. And you're going to try it, and you're going to practice it and see what works and what sticks. And then finally, you're going to perform. So after you put it all together, you figured out the design of it, now you're actually going to move forward into practicing it. And here I did a little bit of a diagram. And what you'll notice that when you practice, you're going to, if something goes wrong, you're going to retry something different. So the first thing, I'm going to take it one by one and go through the use case I've been talking about. So the first thing we did, because we really wanted to go into this vertical, it was the beginning of us thinking about, instead of like building a thing that can do everything possible, how do we meet the need in a particular vertical? So now we've got the vertical, we understood it, we understood how we differentiated in it, but now we had to like get somebody to actually process just one payment using us and to have our first marquee customer. And what we did is we sat in a room, got the whiteboard with us, and we went through the list of the solutions that were possible. And I've already kind of touched upon this, and some of this is not going to be a surprise. And we were like, well, we can ask the software vendor to make a change to support cores. We could ask them also to use embedded fields, so to iframe the ability to collect the credit card number on our servers rather than on the merchant services, which helps take out the PCI compliance. We could install a Raspberry Pi. So instead of doing a dedicated VPN, we could ship something that was akin to allowing us to route into the network directly by using a Raspberry Pi, which I love the name of. We could install and maintain a VPN. Or we could create a Windows-based application that sat in premise to see if we could get around having the VPN, which would deal with the problem of HTTPS to HTTP, and then also whether it would help us with cores, and then being able to connect from the cloud-based browser into the network. So now we wanted to practice and figure out what would work. So here we began the tumbles, and the first two the first three we decided to throw off. So the first two, the software vendor said no, and part of the problem was that people had bought this software, so even if they did the upgrade, it would take years for it to get distributed through the market. So in terms of timing, that was a big no-no, because we had about a month or two to prove out what we wanted to do, and so those came off the list. The Raspberry Pi we threw out because they didn't have any IT staff in. We kind of thought there was a bit of an weird factor in actually putting something and installing it in somebody's premise and I'm a big fan of like thinking if you've got the ick factor already, like just don't even bother mentioning it. So the next two were the two options that would work. The installation of the VPN, and I'm already been like, I don't really like that one because it really changed and molded who we were as a business if we were going to do that. The final option was the window-based application, and we took this one and we decided this is the direction in which we were going to do so. And nobody at the company actually knew how to write a Windows-based application, so it was a little bit of a dust-off, and people had to go research and figure out how to create an Electron app, and it was a little bit nerve-wracking, and I went to a presentation this morning like, you do usually go to market before you're quite ready and you know that it's going to have issues. And this one was kind of super hard because it was going to get installed on-premise on people's laptops. So it was kind of a very scary moment, like to see if we could get the proof of concept to work. And then we needed to perform. So now we've done the choreography, we've done the practice, and now we had our little app. And actually what we did is we installed the VPN for the first marquee customer. And then to be able to test the web app, we switched between the VPN and testing the installed web app. Now, part of the issues also that we had is that everybody either had a laptop that had access to the internet and some people did not. And so we had to figure out how we could install this on a server as well at the same time as somebody's laptop. So part of our testing had it installed on 30 people's laptops to make sure that it worked correctly. And I would say that I would give us like an 8 out of 10 for what we did. The other problem that kind of came in was when we asked questions, so we needed to know the internal IP address of the server that we were reaching and not the external. And every time that we asked the software vendor, they always gave us the external, not the internal. And it was like a constant thing that tripped us over. And so ironically, it's not really technology always that's going to kind of throw you. It's the little things on the outside that end up being told to you incorrectly. And what we had been told originally was there was a percentage of implementations that had been done, and this particular software has 40% of the market, and it's a huge market, that there was a percentage of companies that nobody could access the internet, and we needed the internet to make this work. And one of the reasons why the embedded fields didn't work was because they couldn't go from a Windows environment to a JavaScript and be able to implement it. And they were in a SOAP environment, and we obviously were not in that environment. So software gymnastics in action. We took that strength and flexibility that the platform gave us and built a bridge. And that bridge was via the web application that got installed. And we overcame the VPN option with the application, and also the SSL and the cores were also solved by the same implementation. And it was a very thin client that got installed, and it just sits there and wakes up when somebody's using the computer. And you can do this too. Maybe not the gymnastics, but you can probably use some of these principles that I've talked about by starting off with having a vision, looking at doing the choreography and the design, and then practicing, testing out all of the options that you have on the table, and pick the one that's more authentically aligned to your business, as well as the one that's going to be able to drive you into the market that you're going into. And then perform. So the only way to actually do anything at scale is you've got to start with the one, and then make sure that you can make it repeatable, and take that routine that you built on the mat from the Worlds to the Olympics. So you never start with just the Olympics. And then finally, because it is a gymnast term, is you've got to stick it at the end. You've got to show up, dazzle, and make it happen. Thank you. Are there any questions, or would anybody like to share issues or problems that you might have with making that bridge. Or Casey, who works with me, made the suggestion, it's like, if you have any payments questions, just ask me. So lots of options.
Thank you for the talk, by the way. Appreciate it. I guess the solution was to, you guys made a Windows kind of wrapping app that was installed locally. I don't know if this thing's on or not. But traditionally, you guys were not writing Windows software. Then did you run across any scenarios where like now you're having to make it work with all the different versions of Windows that they're not?
No, because I think that the way that the Electron app was working is it was at a layer at which we didn't need to worry about all the different versions. There was a particular, because it's interacting with the browser, so the browser had to be either Firefox or Chrome interacting with the proxy app. And then at that point, we were all good. If they tried to use an IE browser, things got a little pear-shaped. So when we were doing the testing, we had them install. And fortunately, you can download Chrome without having an IT department come in and do the installation. Because the other thing was they didn't have control over the laptops either. Yeah. But you could install, and having those component pieces together is what made it work. But throwing in IE was like, it was a no-go. We tried it and couldn't make it work.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I forgot to repeat the question, so I'm sorry about that. Yeah. Any other questions? Can you say your name first and then?
Sure. Hi, I'm Roland Smith. I was just a little confused about the laptop was something you were supplying, or the customer, you're using the customer's laptops in their network?
Yeah, it was either a laptop or it was a desktop, and it was what was installed in their call centers. So in their call centers, they were taking credit cards either over the telephone, or they were processing some kind of recurring payments, which was initiated out of the software that we were connecting to. And I think that we were very lucky because the software that was installed on premise had an API access for us to kind of pick into. So the proxy app solved us being able to get there. The API that they had exposed to us allowed us to connect. And so when part of the training and the implementation was in doing the installation, and then the customer service rep would log in to our portal, and then they would go ahead and key the payment data. And then once it was keyed, we then inserted it and injected the token that we had created into the database, which then associated it with the customer record, and then they were done. So the only interaction that they actually did with our software online was that little piece of getting the credit card. And what we replaced, they were using an older version. They had a brick. Well, they had a number of them that they were using. And they replaced that, and one of the ones that they were using was no longer compliant either. So they tried to use it as a stopgap to try and get compliance, and we went in there and took a software solution. So we saved them on hardware costs, and there was a lot of reduction of vendors, like I said, that was removed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. At the front. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Ivan. So my question is that integration with legacy software running on a laptop, was it the target state of the integration of the project, or it was more like an intermediate step in the digital transformation of that business, and eventually the goal is to replace that legacy software running on a Windows machine with modern cloud-based software?
So the question is, because I'm going to remember to repeat the question this time, is whether what we did was an interim step to the goal of replacing the software that was on-premise. And the answer to the question is we never intended to replace the software, because the software itself was doing inventory management. They were doing logistics of shipping, and we're not in the business of that. And when we go and talk to ISVs in the market, like everybody has a specialty that they're doing, and we just wanted to connect and take the payments. And other than that, we did not want to kind of get involved. And plus, the on-premise software was cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so it was like being a little addicted, and it was hard to get it off. And in that market, there's a couple of cloud-based ISVs out there, but they're having a hard time getting traction. So, an option would have been just go to the cloud-based ones, and it would have been easy to create the bridge because it's super easy, right? Like we're talking the same types of technologies. But we would have missed out 40% of the market, and we wanted the 40% of the market, so we took the time. Now, the end vision, which we had, is like, well, it would be so much easier if they did the integration, so much easier. And we are 3 years on from the implementation that we did, and now we're looking at now we've proven ourselves to this particular ISV. They're interested in doing the integration to us and spending the time figuring out how to do that. So we're embarking on that relationship right now, and it's probably going to be, for them, it's going to be a 6 months to 9 months project in order for them to integrate to us. So even if that had been the option at the beginning, it was such a long, drawn-out process when we're so much used to things like taking weeks rather than months.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much for coming. Please remember to grade the presentation in your apps. I don't know where it is, but it's in there somewhere. And thank you very much for coming.